The pleasure is killing you. Not slowly, not dramatically, but quietly, invisibly, like carbon monoxide seeping through the cracks of a locked room. You don't feel it happening. That's the genius of it. You wake up, reach for your phone, and the first hit arrives. A notification, a like, a message. The tiny spark of validation that tells your brain, you matter. And for a moment, you do. For a moment, the emptiness recedes. But what if Jung was right? What if every time you reach for that next hit of pleasure, you're not filling the void, you're feeding it? Carl Jung spent his life mapping the human psyche, diving into the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. He called it the shadow, the repressed, denied, hidden aspects of who we are. The parts we bury under layers of distraction, achievement, and yes, pleasure. Jung believed that modern man was sick, not physically, but spiritually. We had traded meaning for comfort, depth for distraction. And nowhere is this more visible than in our relationship with pleasure itself. Think about your day. How many times do you reach for your phone without thinking? How many hours disappear into screens, into endless scrolling, into the next episode, the next purchase, the next temporary high? We live in an age of infinite access. Any pleasure you can imagine is a click away. Food, entertainment, validation, even connection, or at least the illusion of it. Our ancestors had to hunt for dopamine. We're drowning in it. But here's what Jung understood that we've forgotten. Pleasure without purpose is poison. It doesn't nourish. It numbs. It doesn't heal. It hides. Every swipe, every click, every instant gratification is another brick in the wall between you and the parts of yourself you're too afraid to face. We've created a perfect system for avoiding ourselves, a pleasure machine so efficient it makes Jung's worst predictions look optimistic. But what happens when an entire culture chooses comfort over consciousness? What happens when we become experts at feeling good, but amateurs at being human? That's where we go next, into the dark heart of what this avoidance is really costing us. Jung watched his patients destroy themselves with the very things they thought would save them. The businessman who buried his emptiness in work and whiskey. The housewife who drowned her unexpressed rage in shopping and sedatives. Different era, same sickness. We haven't evolved past this. We've just gotten more sophisticated in our methods of avoidance. Today, we don't need whiskey or sedatives. We have algorithms designed by teams of neuroscientists, explicitly engineered to hijack your attention and keep you coming back. We have apps that deliver dopamine more efficiently than any drug ever could. We have 1,000 ways to feel something, anything, other than what we're actually feeling. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what happens when we never sit still long enough to be irritated? What happens when every moment of potential self-reflection is immediately filled with stimulation? I'll tell you what happens. You become a stranger to yourself. You wake up at 30, 40, 50, and realize you don't know who you are beneath the habits, beneath the routines, beneath the endless cycle of wanting and getting and wanting again. You've spent so long running from discomfort that you've forgotten what you were running from in the first place. The shadow doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't care about your productivity apps, or your meditation subscriptions, or your carefully curated life. The shadow is everything you've refused to integrate, and it will find expression. If not consciously, then unconsciously. If not in growth, then in destruction. Look at the epidemic of anxiety sweeping through the most comfortable generation in human history. Look at the rates of depression among people who have everything their grandparents could have dreamed of. Look at the hollow eyes of influencers selling happiness while drowning in their own emptiness. This isn't coincidence. This is the shadow, demanding to be seen. But we've gotten clever at ignoring these demands. We pathologize the symptoms without addressing the cause. We take pills for anxiety without asking what we're anxious about. We treat depression like a malfunction instead of a message. We've turned suffering itself into another problem to be solved with pleasure, another discomfort to be medicated away. Jung believed that the process of individuation, becoming who you truly are, required a confrontation with the shadow. But confrontation requires stillness. It requires the ability to sit with discomfort, to feel what you've been avoiding, to face what you've been fleeing. And that's exactly what our pleasure-seeking culture is designed to prevent. Every notification is a rescue from the present moment. Every binge-watch session is an escape from the questions you don't want to ask. Every impulsive purchase is a band-aid on a wound you refuse to examine. We've become masters of distraction, but distraction isn't healing. It's just sophisticated denial. The apps know this. The platforms know this. They've studied your psychology more thoroughly than you have. They know exactly how long to wait before sending the next notification. They know exactly what thumbnail will make you click. They know how to keep you scrolling just past the point where you meant to stop. They've turned your unconscious patterns into profit margins, your shadow into shareholder value. And we participate willingly. We hand over our attention like addicts handing over their last dollar, knowing we'll regret it, knowing we'll do it again tomorrow. We've normalized a relationship with technology that would have horrified Jung, a voluntary surrender of consciousness to machines designed to harvest our focus and sell it to the highest bidder. The most insidious part? We know this. Deep down, beneath the noise, we know we're avoiding something. We feel it in the anxiety that creeps in during quiet moments. We feel it in the exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. We feel it in the hunger that no amount of consumption can satisfy. But knowing and doing are different things, and the pull of pleasure is strong. Stronger than logic. Stronger than willpower. Strong enough to keep us trapped in cycles we claim to hate, but can't seem to break. Jung understood that the psyche seeks balance. What we repress in one area will emerge in another. The executive who denies his need for play becomes rigid and bitter. The artist who denies her need for structure becomes chaotic and self-destructive. The person who denies their shadow, who uses pleasure to avoid the dark parts of themselves, becomes something worse than unhappy. They become unconscious, and unconsciousness spreads. It infects relationships, where we connect through screens but not souls. It poisons work, where we're productive but not purposeful. It corrupts rest, where we're entertained but not restored. We become ghosts haunting our own lives, present in body but absent in spirit, going through motions we've forgotten the meaning of. Here's what Jung knew that Instagram doesn't want you to know. Growth hurts. Becoming who you're meant to be requires discomfort. It requires sitting with feelings you'd rather escape. It requires facing truths you'd rather deny. It requires what Jung called a death and rebirth, the death of who you think you are, and the birth of who you actually are. But you can't be reborn if you're constantly sedated. You can't grow if you're always comfortable. You can't individuate if you're perpetually distracted. The pleasure that promises to save you is the very thing keeping you stuck. This isn't about becoming a monk or rejecting all enjoyment. Jung wasn't preaching asceticism. He was warning against unconsciousness. He was pointing to the difference between pleasure that serves life and pleasure that serves avoidance, between joy that emerges from wholeness and stimulation that masks fragmentation. The question isn't whether you'll seek pleasure. You will. We all do. The question is whether that pleasure is taking you toward yourself or away from yourself, whether it's helping you integrate your shadow or helping you hide from it, whether it's part of your becoming or part of your avoiding. Because here's the truth, no algorithm will tell you. The parts of yourself you're running from aren't going anywhere. They're growing stronger with every swipe, every click, every hit of manufactured happiness. They're waiting in the space between stimulations, in the silence between notifications, in the depths you've learned to avoid so expertly. Jung spent his final years watching the world accelerate into distraction. He saw the beginning of what we now live in, a culture that offers infinite ways to feel good and almost no support for the hard work of becoming whole. He knew where it would lead. He warned us. But warnings are easy to ignore when there's always something more interesting to look at. Always another hit of dopamine, just a swipe away. So here you are, at the end of another video, another piece of content in your endless stream of content. And maybe you feel something stirring. Maybe you recognize yourself in these words. Maybe you're tired of running. Or maybe you'll click away, find something lighter, something easier, something that doesn't ask you to look at the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Your shadow is waiting. It's been waiting your whole life, waiting in the space between stimulations, waiting in the silence you keep filling, waiting in the discomfort you keep fleeing, waiting for you to stop running and start becoming. The pleasure will always be there, promising relief. The question is, what are you choosing to relieve yourself from? The temporary discomfort of growth, or the permanent prison of who you're pretending to be? The shadow doesn't care what you choose, but you should, because one day, the screens will go dark, the notifications will stop, the endless stream of pleasures will run dry, and you'll be left with the only thing you can never swipe away from, yourself. The question is, will you recognize who you find?